Today's lesson is Chapter 2, Lesson 4, Multiplying and Dividing Rational Numbers. Our essential question for this lesson is, why is the product of two negative rational numbers positive? We should be able to answer that question by the end of this lesson. The key idea, when multiplying and dividing rational numbers, we're going to use the same rules that we used for signs that when we were multiplying and dividing integers. So let's review what those rules were. If we had a positive integer multiplied by another positive integer, it was a positive answer. If we had a negative integer multiplied by a negative integer, it was also a positive answer. So it basically comes down to if they are the same sign. So if you have two numbers and you're multiplying together, same signs, it's going to equal a positive number. And the same thing happens for division. If you have a positive divided by a positive, it will be a positive. If you have a negative divided by a negative, it will also be a positive. So again, same signs gives you a positive answer, whether it's multiplication or division of two numbers. If we have different signs, a negative times a positive, it will be negative. If we have a positive times a negative, it will be a negative. If we have a negative divided by a positive, still a negative. Or if it's a positive divided by a negative, it's a negative. So for different signs, if we're multiplying or dividing two numbers, different signs will always give you a negative answer. All right, so that's a quick review of multiplying and dividing integers with same signs and different signs. And we're just going to apply those same rules to rational numbers, to fractions and decimals. So let's start with the first example, dividing rational numbers. Find negative 6/5 divided by negative 1/2. This is a divide problem. All right, so I see that both of my numbers have negatives. So both of my numbers are negative. That means that's the same signs. So my answer has to be positive. So I'm going to put a little plus sign over there to note that it is going to be a positive answer. Now, all I have to do is take a look at the two fractions and do that problem. 6/5 divided by 1/2. Now, we have to remember the rule for division with fractions. And that rule, if you can remember, is KCF, which is keep, change, flip. Keep, change, flip. Okay? And what that means is we're going to keep the first fraction as it is, 6/5. We're going to change a division sign to a multiplication sign, and we're going to flip the second fraction, so 1/2 becomes 2/1. And now we're going to be multiplying fractions. Well, multiplying fractions is simple. We just multiply the top straight across, the numerators, and we multiply the denominator straight across. So 6 times 2 we multiply, and 5 times 1. 6 times 2 is equal to 12, and 5 times 1 is equal to 5. So we have 12/5, which we have to simplify and turn into a mixed number. So 5 goes into 12 2 times. 5 times 2 is 10. That means there are 2 left over. So we make that into our fraction with a denominator of 5. So our final answer, since we have a positive answer up here, so our final answer is 2 2/5. Positive, because a negative divided by a negative will always be a positive. Second example, find negative 5 1/5 divided by 2 1/3. So first thing I notice is the signs. I have a negative number and I have a positive number. And negative divided by a positive will always be a negative answer. So I'm going to go ahead and put that negative sign over there in the answer portion. And now all I have to do is the fraction part. Well, I have a mixed number to start with, 5 1/5 divided by 2 1/3. So I have two mixed numbers that I need to change into improper fractions first before I can do anything else. So remember, to change into improper, I multiply the denominator times the whole number out front, and then I add the numerator. So 5 times 5 is 25, plus the 1 on top is 26, and I keep that over the denominator of 5, divided by 3 times 2 is 6, plus the 1 is 7, and that's 7 over 3. I keep the 3 as the denominator. Now I have a division problem. So we're going to use the keep, change, flip rule again. So I'm going to keep the first as 26 over 5. I'm going to change division to multiplication, and I'm going to flip my second fraction to 3 over 7. And then I'm going to go ahead and multiply. First thing I'm going to look for is anything that I might be able to cross cancel, but doesn't look like I have anything at this time. So I'm going to just multiply the numerators together and then the denominators together. 26 times 3. 20 times 3 would be 60. 6 times 3 is 18. 60 plus 18 is 78. And on the bottom I have 35. This is an improper fraction, so I can go ahead and simplify this. 35 goes into 78 twice. 35 times 2 is 70, so that leaves 8 left over, and 35 stays my denominator. And now I have to take this and add it with the sign that I determined earlier. Since I was doing a negative divided by positive, I know it has to be a negative answer, so it's going to be a negative 2 and 8 over 35. All right, so if you have any questions on that, please make sure you're asking in class. Now's a good time for you to pause. There's an on your own problem. So you're going to do this problem on your own with the work, and then you're going to restart the video when you're finished, and you can take a look at your solution. So go ahead and do that. Okay, hopefully you're back with your work. And so I look at this problem. I have 1/3 divided by negative 2 2/3. So the first thing I notice is I have a positive divided by a negative. That's different signs. So different signs is going to give me a negative answer. So I'm automatically writing down a negative. Now I'm going to write down my problem. 1/3 divided by, without the negative sign, 2 2/3. And I have a mixed number that I need to change into an improper fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The 1/3 is just going to stay 1/3 divided by 3 times 2 is 6, plus the 2 up top is 8. And we'll keep that over top of the original denominator, 3. So now I have a fraction divided by a fraction, and this is a time to use KCF, keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep the 1/3. I'm going to change division to multiplication, and I'm going to flip the second fraction and turn it into 3 over 8. Now I'm going to look to see if there's anything that I can cross cancel. I see that there's a 3 in the denominator in the first fraction and a 3 in the numerator of the second fraction. They both can be divided by 3. So if I go ahead and do that, 3 divided by 3 in the denominator is 1. 3 divided by 3 in the numerator is also 1. Now I can go ahead and just multiply my numerator and my denominator straight across. 1 times 1 in the numerator equals 1. And in the denominator, 1 times 8 equals 8. Now, it's hard to see it, but right here, I had a negative sign when I looked at my signs in the beginning. 1/3 divided by a negative 2 2/3 was a positive divided by a negative. So that told me my final answer had to be a negative answer. So my final answer has to be negative 1/8. Again, if you have any questions, please make sure that you're asking in class when you come back. All right, now we're going to do multiplying rational numbers. All right, we're going to do the multiplying rational numbers with decimals. All right, so let's just go with the first example here. Find negative 2.5 times 3.6. So I'm just going to apply the rule. A negative times a positive, that's different signs. If I have different signs, my answer is going to be a negative. And then all I have to do is multiply the decimals. 2.5 times 3.6. Now, when we're multiplying decimals, we don't have to line up the decimal points. It just happens to work out that way. And we're going to talk about how many decimal places we need to keep in our answer based on the number of total decimal places we have in our problem. So there's 1 decimal place right here where the 5 is. That's 1. And then there's a second decimal place down here where the 6 is. That's 2. 1 here, and then another 1 down here, total of 2. So we have to make sure we have 2 decimal places in our answer. So let's go ahead and just multiply, forgetting that the decimals are there, and then we can add that decimal point in later. So the 6 times the 5 gives me 30. I'm going to carry my 3. 6 times 2 is 12, plus the 3 is 15. All right, since I'm moving over a decimal place or over a place value to the 3 to start, I have to put in a placeholder for where the 6 was. Now I'm going to do 3 times 5 is 15. I'm going to carry that 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus that 1 is 7. And now I'm just going to add these straight down. So I'm going to get a 0. 5 plus 5 is also 0, carry your 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 7 is 9. And we're supposed to have 2 decimal places. So I'm going to come over 2 decimal places, put a decimal there, and I have 9.00, which we could just rewrite as 9. We don't need the 0.00 because it doesn't add any value to the number. So we have a 9. But remember, in the beginning, we saw that it was a different signs and it was going to give us a negative answer. So our final answer should be negative 9. All right, let's move on to the next one. Find 1.8 times negative 5.1. So I have a positive times a negative. Those are different signs. So that means I'm going to have a negative answer. Then all I have to do is multiply my 2 numbers. Now, it doesn't matter which number you put on top. You can put the 5.1 on top if you're more comfortable with that. I just put the first one on top and the second one on the bottom. Either way is fine. So I'm just going to remember I have 1 decimal place value here to put in my final answer and 1 here. So I have 2 total decimal place values that I've got to put in my final answer. Now we're just going to go ahead and multiply. So I have 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 1 is 1. I'm moving over a place value, so I need to put in a placeholder. 5 times 8 is 40. Carry the 4. 5 times 1 is 5, plus the 4 is 9. I'm going to add up the columns. 8 plus 0 is 8. 1 plus 0 is 1. And 9 plus nothing is 9. And then I go back to this part here and say, okay, I need to make sure I have 2 numbers to the right of my decimal point. So I'm going to put my decimal point right here between the 9 and the 1, because now the 1 and the 8, 2 numbers, are to the right of my decimal point. But then I go back and look at the beginning and say, okay, I had a positive times a negative. That was different signs. I already said my answer has to be negative. So I have negative 9.18 as my final answer. All right, if you have any questions on that, please make sure to ask in class. Here's an on your own problem that you should be trying at this point. So go ahead and pause the video and do the problem with the work, and then come back, restart the video when you're ready to check your solution. Okay, so I take a look at this problem and I see negative 6.3 times negative 0.6. So that's a negative times a negative. That's same sign. I know that the answer to a same sign problem has to equal a positive. Same signs is always positive. So all I got to do is take the numbers and multiply them. 6.3 times 0.6. Right? Again, it doesn't matter which one you write on top and bottom. 6 times 3 is 18. I'm going to carry the 1. 6 times 6 is 36, plus the 1 is 37. Make sure you line that 7 underneath that 6 that we're multiplying by. 6 times 6, so the 7 has to be underneath that 6. All right? Now I have a 0 right here. Times 3 is 0. Don't forget, I'm sorry, I forgot the placeholder. Since we moved over 1 place value, I got to put a placeholder in. 0 times 3 is 0. 0 times 6 is also 0. So I'm not really adding anything when I'm multiplying by 0. But I like to do that multiplication anyway, just to be in a habit. Now I add up my columns. 8 plus 0 is 8. 7 plus 0 is 7. 3 plus 0 is 3. And then I go back to my problem and I see that I have 1 number to the right of the decimal point and a second number to the right of the decimal point. So I need to make sure I have 2 numbers to the right of the decimal point. So I have to put that decimal point between the 3 and the 7 to make sure that 2 numbers, the 7 and the 8, are to the right of the decimal point. And since my answer has to be positive, it's just going to be a positive 3.78. All right, again, if you have any questions, make sure you're asking in class when you come back. All right, example 3. Multiplying more than 2 rational numbers at a time. All right, so there's a couple of different ways that we can look at this. I'm going to teach you the most straightforward way, and then in class we'll talk about the other way that we could do it as well. That might make it a little easier for you, but let's just do it the straightforward way this time. So the first example, find negative 1/7 times, and now we have a quantity, 4/5 times negative 7. Right? Well, PEMDAS order of operations tells us that we should do stuff inside the quantity or the parentheses first, or brackets. Okay, it's a grouping symbol, so we have to do stuff in there first and then multiply by what's outside. So let's do that. We're going to do the 4/5 times the negative 7 first. So when I look at that, I see that I have a positive times a negative, different signs for that. So different signs for that tells me I'm going to get a negative answer, right? And then I look at it and I got 4/5 times 7 that I've got to work out. Because again, we're not using the sign because now we know what the sign's going to be in our answer. So we're just going to multiply the numbers. So I'm going to move that over here. I got 4/5 times 7. In order to multiply fractions, I need to have fraction times fraction. So I'm going to multiply this by putting the 7 over a 1, because that means the same thing. 7 over 1 is equal to 7. Now I can go ahead and multiply my numerators straight across and my denominators straight across. 4 times 7 is 28, and 5 times 1 is 5. So I'm going to bring that 28 over 5 over here where I put my negative sign, because I knew my answer had to be negative because it was a positive times a negative. And now I'm going to bring down the rest of my problem. I have negative 1/7 that I want to multiply by that. All right, so I look at this and I say, okay, I have a negative number times a negative number. That's same signs. The rules for same signs are if it's a negative times a negative, the answer has to be a positive. So I know it's going to equal a positive number. So now all I have to do is just multiply my two fractions together. And I'm going to look for anything that I can cross cancel here. So the 7 and the 28 can both be divided by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 28 divided by 7 is 4. Now I can just multiply straight across. Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. 1 times 4 is 4 in the numerator. 1 times 5 is 5 in the denominator. And I'm just going to put that over here with my plus sign, since I know my answer has to be positive, because I had a positive number, a negative number times a negative number. They were same sign. Same sign always gives us a positive answer. All right, let's move on over to the next problem. So I have three numbers again. I have these parentheses, but that's not really a grouping. That's just separating the negative 100 from the multiplication sign, because we can't have two signs next to each other, a multiply and a negative sign. So we don't really have any grouping to do. So we're just going to work, since everything's multiplication, we're just going to work from left to right like the order of operations tells us to do. So my first two, negative 7.2 times 0.1. When I look at that, I have a negative times a positive. That is going to be different signs. And different signs automatically gives me a negative answer. All right, so I'm going to bring that negative down. Over up to the right here, I'm going to do the actual math part. So I'm going to take the 7.2 and I'm going to multiply by the 0.1. All right, 1 times 2 is 2, and the 1 times 7 is 7. Put in a placeholder because I'm sliding over now to the 0, 1 place. 0 times 2 is 0, and 0 times 7 is 0. And I'm going to go ahead and just add up the vertical columns. 2 plus 0 is 2. 7 plus 0 is 7. 0 plus nothing is 0. And I go back and I say, okay, I've got one number to the right of the decimal point here and another number to the right of the decimal point there. That's two numbers altogether. So I have to have two numbers to the right of my decimal point. So I have to put my decimal point between the 0 and the 7. So now I have negative 0.72, because I already determined it had to be a negative answer, times, I'm bringing down the rest of my problem, negative 100. Okay? So I look at this problem and I see I have a negative number times a negative number. Those are same signs. So when we do same sign, I know that my answer has to be a positive answer. Right? And now it's just a matter of multiplying. And I'm not going to worry about the signs, I'm just going to multiply the numbers. So let me just do 0.72 times 100. Again, it doesn't matter which one you put on top and which one goes on the bottom. So 0 times 2 is 0. 0 times 7 is 0. 0 times 0 is 0. I'm going to slide over to the next 0, so I'll put in a 0 placeholder. 0 times 2 again is 0. 0 times 7 is 0. 0 times 0 is 0. I'm sliding over to the 1. That's a total of 2 places over, so I got to put 2 placeholders in. Now I'm going to multiply. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 7 is 7, and 1 times 0 is 0. I'm going to add up all my columns. I get 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0 again. 0 plus 0 plus 2 is a 2. 0 plus 7 is a 7, and I just have this 0 at the end. If I go back and look at this number here, I see that I have 2 numbers to the right of the decimal point, which means, and I don't have any here, so that means I still have 2 numbers total that need to be to the right of the decimal point. So that means this 2 zeros over here to the right need to be to the right of the decimal point. And then I look at this and I have 072.00. Well, the 2 zeros here don't add any value to it, so I can drop them. And the 0 over here doesn't add any value. So all I really have is 72. So I'm going to bring that over here to where my plus sign is because I know my answer has to be positive. Okay, again, if you have any questions on this, make sure you ask in class. Be happy to help out. And the last thing we've got to do today is the real life application. So let's take a look at this example. An investor owns stocks A, B, and C. What is the mean change in the value of the stocks? Mean change, what does that mean? Okay, well, how do we find the mean? We're looking at the amount that is going to change, but we don't want to do it by each individual stock. We want to find the mean change or the average change for all 3 stocks. So how do we find the mean? We find the mean by getting the sum of the numbers and dividing that by the number of numbers that we have. All right, so we're going to add up all the numbers, and then we're going to divide that by the number of numbers that we have. All right, well, if I look up here right now, I can see I have 3 numbers. So our denominator will be 3. And I have these 3 numbers because this is the change, okay? We're talking about how much it's changing. The stocks are changing. Stock A is changed by $180.39, and it's negative, which means it went down. Stock B changed by $127.28, and it's positive, so that means that stock value went up. And stock C changed by $280.52, and it's negative, which means it also went down. All right, so I need to add those 3 numbers together, and that will be the numerator when we're trying to figure out the mean. So let's write that part out. Negative 180.39 plus 127.28. Now this minus 280.52 we can just rewrite over here as minus 280.52, or what we could be doing is what they're probably asking us to do is to add a negative, but either way. So I think I'm just going to leave it as minus 280.52. And what we're going to do is we're just going to work from left to right again. Sorry, from left to right. So we're going to start, because we have additions and subtractions, and order of operations tells us to go from left to right. So I'm going to start with the first 2. I have a negative number plus a positive number. Now you can't get confused with this. It's not a multiplication or division, so we're not going to use those. We got to think back to a previous lesson about adding numbers with different signs. So we're adding numbers with different signs, which tells us to take the bigger looking number, 180.39, and subtract the smaller looking number, 127.28, and keep the sign of the bigger looking number for our answer. So I'm going to do that. So 8 from 9 is 1. 2 from 3 is 1. Bring down the decimal point. 7 from 0, I can't do that, so I'm going to have to borrow. I'm going to borrow from the 8. 7 from 10 is 3. 2 from 7 is 5. and 1 from 1 is 0. So my answer is $53.11, but I need to go back up and look and see in this part right here, the bigger looking number was 180.39, and it was negative. So my answer has to be a negative 53.11. So now I'm going to take that negative 53.11. I'm going to get myself a little more room on here. All right. So I have the negative 53.11, and I still have to bring down the other part of the problem, which is minus 280.52. So I have a subtraction problem here, and this is a subtraction problem that doesn't look normal. So I have to use the subtraction rules, which is keep, change, opposite. So I'm going to keep the first. I'm going to change the minus to a plus and change the 280.52 to its opposite, which is negative 280.52. So now I've turned this problem into an addition problem. And it's an addition problem with same signs. And the rules for addition with same signs say that we're going to add the two numbers together and then just keep the sign of both of those numbers. And since both of those numbers are negative, our answer has to be negative. So we're just going to add those two numbers. I'm going to have 53.11 plus, remember, we got to line up the decimal points here when we're doing addition or subtraction, 280.52. And we're just going to add those two together. So 1 plus 2 is 3. 1 plus 5 is 6. Decimal point comes down. 3 plus 0 is 3. 5 plus 8 is 13. I need to carry the 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. So our final answer is $333.63. Final for adding those, those changes together. So it's negative 333.63 because we already identified that same signs, when we add them, we're going to keep the sign. So it's negative 333.63. Now, let's not put that there yet. Let me get rid of that. All right. So when we just add up the three changes, let me make this look a little clearer. So it was equal to negative 333.63. This was adding up all the changes, right? But that's not what we were asked to do. We were asked to find the mean. So remember, all we did so far is we did the top part. We did sum of the numbers. So we just added up all the numbers and got negative 333.63. So I'm going to put that up top here, negative 333.63. And we have to divide that by how many numbers we had. And we already noted that we had 3 numbers. So I got to go ahead and do that division. So what does this look like? I'm not using the calculator, and you won't be using the calculator on this section either. So what does this mean? Well, remember, the top, our answer is going to stay negative. And then we have to do long division. So I'm going to do that long division down here. The top number, the numerator, goes inside the house. There's a decimal point right there. The bottom number, the denominator, goes outside the house. And it looks like our smartboard is having a little bit of a problem here, so just hold on for a moment until it begins to work again. And here we go. Sorry about that wait. So we have 3 on the outside of the house. So 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 is 0. We bring down the next 3. 3 goes into this 3 one time. That's also 3. Bring down the 0, and then bring down the 3. 3 goes into this 3 exactly one time, and that's 3. Remainder of 0. We have to bring our decimal point up here. 3 goes into this 6 exactly 2 times. So, oops, I forgot to bring that 6 down. Okay, so 3 goes into that 6 2 times. 2 times 3 is 6. Gives us a remainder of 0. Bring down the other 3. And 3 goes into that 3 exactly 1 time. And that's a 3. And we have a remainder of 0, and there's nothing left for us to do. So we're going to take this answer that we got and bring it up here with our negative sign. So the average or the mean change is negative 111.6. $1,121. And what that means is that on average, the stocks, each of the stocks is going down by $111.21. Right? I know this is a lot of work on this kind of problem, and there's a lot to think about, but this is the kind of work that we're expecting out of our 7th grade students. So, just stick to it, and you will be able to work through it as long as you follow along with what I do and ask questions, please, when you don't know what's going on. All right, that's the end of this lesson, and we'll see you on the next one.